1, 2, 3, 4. If you can do all your stuff, what can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
Oh, hey.
Hi, Claire.
What is happening?
I am drinking mint tea out of my 3 Jean Moon mug.
It's a good day.
It's a good day.
I'm very excited because in about 5 days, you and I are going to have our first hangout.
Yes, I know. I'm so excited. I'm going to see you in person and be able to touch you.
Yeah.
For the first time in, 18 months?
That sounds right. Yesterday, I did something really cool, which was my first social engagement post-vaccine.
Yay!
I went with Tim to Fort Collins and ate Nashville hot chicken at my favorite place with 3 of my favorite people, not including you. My dear friend Sandra, her wonderful husband Sean, and their delightful daughter Madeline.
We just would need to remind everyone that Sandra and Sean have been instrumental to this podcast. Literally instrumental. Because the first microphone we used for our interviews is a loaner from Sean.
They also own an awesome music shop in Boulder, Colorado called Wood Songs. And they sell shit online. Not shit, good shit. And I will say, I need to order a new t-shirt from them because much like the fabled purple t-shirt, their t-shirts are really soft and delicious. And so, had lunch with them, kissed them so many times on their faces, which I'm going to do to you as well. Brace yourself.
I'll begin moisturizing immediately.
Sandra gave me a belated birthday present because we didn't see each other, and it is this.
Did she make those?
So Sandra made these tiny bird heads. They're ceramic, and she painted them. And they are the most wonderful characters.
You guys, they're about 2 inches tall each. One of them is slightly taller. They are in light sky blues and grass, very light sort of grass green. Cute little beaks, little eyes.
And it's hard to describe, but they just have so much character. And everything Sandra makes has so much character. She is one of the people that I work in theater with. And I told her that from now on, I wanted her to just make all of her own stuff. She does a lot of puppetry and mask work and all of the really cool physical theater that centers around objects. She works with artists a lot that make things for her. But everything she makes, it's hard to describe. It just has a spirit. You just look at it and you're like, that is alive.
Yeah, yeah.
She understands relationships to objects. She's taught me that objects have feelings, which I believe. There's a spirit in everything, which sounds so hippie, I know, but I'm saying it.
I think it's something we know as kids and we just grow out of or are taught out of, right? Like, no, this is alive. This thing is alive.
I'm going to set them right here, and they're going to be our podcast mascots.
Nice. Those are beautiful. Thank you, Sandra, for making them for Claire and thereby allowing me to see them.
What's going on with you?
So this is not exciting, and I've talked about it before. And it wasn't exciting then either. So I'm definitely going to talk about it now.
We've heard that you hate this, and we're going to keep doing it, everyone.
We know that you don't like it, so here it is again. I have told you and our listeners before that my back closet gets insane. And partially I have a thing where I cannot throw containers away that might be useful one day. And it's any size container and any material container. So glass jars, ceramic jars, little metal tins, boxes, bubble envelopes, bubbles themselves, all of those things. I have a very hard time getting rid of them because the potential utility is very powerful for me.
Also, you're always thinking about the eventual homestead.
I am, it's true. I have a pile, literally a pile, several feet tall, of egg cartons for the time at which I'm going to need to start seeds in something and I don't want to buy plastic. Like, this is what we're talking about. So that back closet gets a little crazy. I cleaned it out again because I finally, and this is red letter day in the Sparks household, finally bought a vacuum cleaner. Now, I know those of you who don't live in filth probably already have one.
This is Teresa's hot take. There's this new machine on the market that promises to revolutionize home cleaning.
It's called a vacuum cleaner.
It's the wave of the future.
So we have one, but it doesn't work. Like so many of them. They exist, they make noise, but they don't really do much. So I cleaned out that closet again so that I might have a place that was not my living room for the vacuum to live. And I know for those of you who don't live in filth, as I said, that's not a big deal. But it was a big deal, and it was a very extreme. I am very proud of that accomplishment this week.
Very cool. Public service announcement. The second season of Lupin.
Oh, I saw!
Just came out on Netflix. So, hey everybody, this is the podcast called It Chooses You.
Hello, we've chosen you, and it's chosen us this week. Again, I'm Teresa Sparks.
I am Claire Patton. And we are friends. And you are our friends. And we tell you about cool stuff. That's the way it works. It's super simple.
It really is. It's cool stuff that is not timely and that maybe requires that you have read a book, but like not in a judgy way. Just like you get interested in stuff.
And it doesn't have to be a book related to what we talk about. Just a book at some point. Like, whatever.
Yes, you had an interest, you followed it. That step.
And we'll make a deal with you. We will tell you about cool stuff, and we will keep telling you about cool stuff if you will simply, subscribe and download our episodes, because that helps us spread the word.
Deal. Done.
This week, I am going to tell you about mysterious disappearances. Ooh.
That was the best self-generated soundtrack I've ever heard.
I think we're going to make it our new theme song.
You, definitely.
I didn't ask you, but I did talk to the board, and they approved it, so.
Wait, who's on our board?
Don't worry about it.
Oh, I didn't know that. It's good to know that someone is handling this, because I'm not. I'm glad that they are.
Hey, look, someone's in charge. It's just not us.
Perfect. So much easier that way. Being in charge of your own destiny is overrated. Whew, so tough.
Teresa, what do you know about the rapture?
Oh, Lord.
You grew up in West Virginia. I don't believe you were religious.
It's true. We were not.
My hunch is that, like me, although you weren't raised to believe this stuff, it was in the air.
Proximal. Yeah. And you can tell how far I've wanted to distance myself because I said proximal when describing it. That indicates a lot about my perceived location relative to people who believe the rapture is real. So the rapture is a moment in the future where the worthy and all of, I think, none of their stuff, just their bodies, will leave the earth and be taken to heaven to be with Jesus forever. And those of us left on earth will become hell, and we will be engulfed in flames and poison and scorpions and Nickelback for the rest of eternity.
Right. The thing I love about it is it's a day when those of us left behind will all be very, very sorry, but it'll be too late.
Yes. That seems to be the important part of it, is that they want us to be aware enough to be sorry, but then not be able to fix it.
Oh, yeah. Ultimate in religious passive aggression.
It's spiteful.
Oh, yeah. I didn't grow up believing in the rapture or being taught that the rapture was a thing. I grew up Episcopalian.
I don't even know what that is. It's like Catholic light?
Exactly. And through various parents of friends in school and things like that, I was exposed to the idea of it at a young age, which if you think about is a pretty fucked up thing to say to children.
Yeah.
When you wake up one day, all the people you love might be gone, which is terrifying for a child. And if you're not one of them, then that means you done wrong and you're going to suffer.
It's comparable to the prayer that my grandmother made me say any night I stayed over with her as a child, which is terrifying for a child, and yet I was forced to say it, which is, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. I'm 4 years old.
Right.
Am I going to die? But I only might die in my sleep at Grandma's house because my mother does not make me say this shit.
Right.
This is why I like Baba Yaga so much, because my grandmas were evil.
You're saying Baba Yaga reminds you of your grandma? Or she's better than your grandma?
She's better at what she does than my grandmother's, but this is why I'm so interested, because I have that as an archetype from a very young age.
This idea of the rapture made me a little bit fascinated with disappearances from like a young age. And I remember several occasions, and I would say maybe from the ages of like 8 to 10, where I would wake up from a nap and everyone in my house would be gone. Truth be told, it is perfectly possible they told me they were going somewhere before I went to sleep. It is perfectly possible they left a note. It is perfectly possible that they were responsible parents. That is not how I remember it, however. All I remember is waking up and everybody would be gone. And so I'd kind of wander around the house like Kevin McAllister in Home Alone.
Why you've referenced that twice in 2 weeks is something we will talk about later.
And like, hello. And then going outside to see if their cars were there. Because if their cars were there, it meant it was the rapture.
Right.
And I was an imaginative kid, so I think I also had this last person on Earth fantasy, like, playing in my head.
Sure.
If their cars weren't there, I was logical enough to think, perhaps they're just somewhere else, not like heaven. While I burn in fiery Texas, I would stand outside and wait to see a neighbor or a car drive by so that I could have confirmation that perhaps the rapture was not indeed here. And if it was, at least I would have company. Like, I had this deep-seated fear that I would be the only one.
The only one who doesn't go to heaven.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Hey, little Claire, the standard was so low and you just didn't make the cut. You were the only one. This all made me very fascinated with disappearances as a child. Also growing up in the 80s where, let's face it, they were pretty common.
Oh, yeah. I have not thought about the rapture, but the idea that everyone's clothes would be left behind always made me laugh. Like, there would just be piles of clothes, like, including socks and underwear, everybody. Your underwear is just going to be on the street or in the driver's seat of your car.
Isn't that Teresa's bra?
She must have been very good.
Her boobs don't even need that bra in heaven.
That's right. That's what heaven is.
A-cups.
It's true. It's 100% true.
It's all bralettes up there.
That's the way to sell heaven to me. Gravity doesn't work in heaven, guys.
Maybe we should rethink our attitudes about the rapture, Teresa.
I think we should talk to female astronauts about what that's like. That's what I want. I want a serious interview with those gals, talking about how awesome that must be.
First story we're going to talk about today is the strange disappearance of Agatha Christie.
Oh my god, I didn't know she disappeared. I'm so excited.
I actually first learned about Agatha Christie's disappearance from Doctor Who. There's an episode about it. I believe it's a David Tennant Doctor Who episode. I'm not 100% sure. Agatha Christie's husband was Colonel Archibald Christie, Archie, and the couple had met at the beginning of World War I. By 1926, they lived in Sunningdale with their daughter Rosalind. I think Sunningdale it's just outside of London, I believe.
Okay.
They had kind of moved out to the suburbs. On the evening of Friday, December 3rd, 1926, Agatha Christie was overheard arguing with her husband, Archie. She kissed her daughter goodnight, left her house carrying only an attaché case, jumped in her Morris Crawley. I call it the Poirot car. It's just kind of the 20s car, right?
Okay.
She jumped in her Morris Crawley and peeled out of their gravel driveway. She was 36 at the time. She wouldn't be seen again for 11 days.
Okay.
The next day, her car was found at the edge of a chalk pit with the headlights on, her coat inside, and a bottle labeled poison, lead, and opium. Agatha Christie had left letters to her husband, her secretary, and her brother-in-law. The secretary said that her letter was business-related and it was basically a schedule. Her husband refused to share the contents of the letter, saying it was too personal. And her brother-in-law claimed that his letter explained that she had gone to a spa.
So she sent a letter to her brother-in-law, but not her sister?
Right.
Interesting.
The police searched an area called the Silent Pool, which locals claimed was a bottomless body of water, because they thought that suicide was a strong option. I don't know, maybe the poison, lead, and opium bottle, made them think that.
She was super famous, though, right? Her books have been translated into every language. She's the most popular writer in the world.
She was very well known at the time. I don't know if she was at the height of her fame yet.
I see.
A few days later, on December 13th, somewhere between 10 and 15,000 volunteers showed up to help search for her.
Mm-hmm.
There was a seance held at the chalk pit where her car was found.
Oh, yes.
One of the mediums claimed that Agatha Christie met with dun 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 foul play. That's easy.
If you're in the medium game, and somebody's disappeared, you only have two options, dead or alive, right?
Yeah.
And so, 50-50, you're going to be right.
Saying, yeah, I'm getting the feeling that she's fine. Is not very interesting.
I'm getting the feeling she really needed a spa weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of stress, but then the stress is relieved. Her nails look beautiful, you guys.
She is glowing. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle himself gave a medium one of Christie's gloves to try and discover where she was. I don't know what that medium said.
Also, how did he have one of her gloves? Did they get it on?
I don't know. Maybe they were friends because they were both writers. Who knows?
Maybe.
11 days after she disappeared mysteriously, Christie was found at the spa in Yorkshire, as her brother-in-law had claimed. But, according to her husband and to others who were there, she was suffering from a case of amnesia, unable to remember who she was or how she got to the spa. Christie obviously eventually recovered from this amnesia, but for the rest of her life, she refused to speak about what happened during those 10 days. She did, however, check into the spa with the name Mrs. Tressa Neal. Neal was the last name of her husband's mistress that she had just learned about. Earlier that year, in August of 1926, Colonel Archie had asked Christie for a divorce. 15 months after Christie's disappearance, she and the colonel got a divorce. The colonel married Nancy Neal, his mistress, a week later, which is, like, all we need to know.
Poor taste.
4 years later, Agatha Christie met and married a hot archaeologist who was 13 years younger than her.
Yeah, that's right. You marrying younger than you is the best revenge.
Always. So that is the story of the mysterious disappearance of Agatha Christie.
I'm sure there's so much speculation about what happened. She never said.
She never said. And there's a lot of speculation that obviously it was related to her marital troubles. There's even speculation that she was trying to shame them, like out them for being adulterers. There's speculation, of course, that she was so desperate that she was suicidal or that she had a mental breakdown. Every speculation is like what you'd expect. Yeah. I don't know if you have ideas, but we could just create a new theory right here and right now.
Gosh, well, she knew about the affair. The affair had obviously been going on for a while and was serious. She told her brother-in-law, not her sister, that she was going to a spa. Maybe that's a product of men being more listened to by police in the era. Bottle of poison was found in the car. Fingerprints on the bottle?
I don't know anything about fingerprints.
Was she maybe stalking the mistress? And she was going to fake her own death so she could kill the mistress and no one would suspect her? But then she chickened out or something and came back 11 days later. She's like, hey guys, what's up? No, I don't remember what happened.
That is the best impression of Agatha Christie I've ever heard.
Yeah, I have no further speculation, but I have told you recently about Evil Under the Sun.
But it's the Poirot book.
It's a Poirot book, yeah, exactly. And it's a Poirot book that has been adapted into a movie, and Peter Ustinov plays Poirot, and Maggie Smith plays the hotel keeper, and James Mason plays one of the characters, and Roddy McDowall plays one of the characters, and it's about the murderer. Oh, and, oh, the best. Dame Diana Rigg is in it. She plays the one who is murdered.
Oh, okay.
And it's a horrible 80s camp movie that is just like over the top, and it's filmed like a play. There are basically only 2 sets, and there are a lot of those extreme close-ups where everything is like soft focused and everyone's beautiful. And Maggie Smith has like permed bright red hair.
Back in the 80s when everything was a dream.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like an episode of Fantasy Island, except there's a body. So I'm a fan of Agatha Christie for that reason.
I am now going to tell you about a very different kind of disappearance. In 1986, the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid commissioned a sculpture from artist Richard Serra. That's Serra. The sculpture was called Equal Parallel Guernica Benghazi. The museum paid Serra $200,000 for the sculpture. It was made out of steel and weighed 38 tons. That's 76,000 pounds, just FYI. I Googled it. Yeah. It was a series of large slabs of steel that Serra either casted or had casted, I couldn't tell. 2 blocks are square and 2 are rectangles. These slabs were arranged in a room to make them look like a single image, but you could walk through and experience them differently. The idea is to draw a connection and place on equal footing the 2 events of the Nazis' bombing of the Basque town of Guernica. That was done at Franco's request in 1937. And the American bombing of Benghazi in 1986. This is an earlier one. What had happened was that there was an attack on a Berlin nightclub in which a couple of Americans died. And there was a Libyan group that was blamed for that. So in retribution for that, the American Air Force bombed Benghazi. Both events caused civilian deaths.
Oh, sure.
There's some artsy lingo on the museum's website about history functioning as an individual corporeal experience versus a construction of the world. But I think the message is these events are equal. Human deaths occurred. It doesn't matter if you're a Nazi or an American. Killing civilians is horrible. So it was made in 1986. And in 1990, the 4 pieces of metal that made up the sculpture were put into storage because the museum was renovating. And it was a very large piece. But I don't know if they were really renovating or if they just didn't really like the sculpture because they didn't look for it again till 2005, 15 years later.
Oops.
And by then, the warehouse where it was kept, it was a specialized warehouse for large works of art, I guess.
And therefore, its own kind of museum. Wouldn't it be fun to go there?
Right? By then, the warehouse had gone into receivership, and it just means that they were trying to recover funds from creditors to avoid bankruptcy. So there's like a receiver, a person in charge of that. Basically, the sculpture was missing and has never been found. I think that it's pretty obvious what happened. I feel sure, and there's a theory put forward, that the sculpture was sold for scrap.
Yeah.
I just really like this idea that one person looks at something and goes, what an amazing, profound piece of art. And another person's like, hey, that's really good scrap steel, y'all. We could make some money off this.
There are tons of scrap steel there, man. Yeah, exactly. It's the same idea of the president of a paper company looking at a forest and only counting the number of board feet.
The artist Serra rebuilt the sculpture, and it's now on display at the Reina Sofia Museum. I will note, I don't remember the exact amount, but they paid him again.
Oh, of course they did, because that's not his fault. Their poor management is not his responsibility.
Yeah, and I'll get into my sources at the end of all these stories, but one of my sources was this BBC piece about it. There was this really weird line at the end. It said, the original sculpture will be destroyed if it reappears. And I was like, are they threatening the sculpture? Like, you better not come around here again. We'll destroy your ass. Your flat ass.
You think oh my gosh, I love that idea. Well, and also because if it's an addition, it's worth less.
Yep.
Not worthless, but worth less.
Also, why destroyed?
Sell for scrap. Again. Wait, no,
I think it also could have been, if they think that whoever took it is still out there, it could have been a message to them. If you have this, you're not going to get any money from the art world for it.
That's right. You can't hold this sculpture for ransom.
I'm just imagining them selling it on the black market and somebody going, are you sure these aren't just slabs of steel?
Are you sure this isn't just scrap metal in a pile? Oh my god. Amazing.
We could make a fortune in forgeries of that piece.
Oh my god. Well, this reminds me of the story from last week that some Italian artist sold a 5x5 square foot of space with nothing in it.
Oh,
and
really?
They called it an invisible, intangible sculpture, and it sold for $18,000.
Oh my god, I love it.
The requirements for displaying it are that it has to be in an unimpeded, perfectly clear 5x5 area. It doesn't have any lighting or temperature requirements. You just have to have a 5x5 square foot of space.
So if you, poke your finger in that space, it's worthless?
You're interfering with the art. My thing is someone paid for that. It raises a ton of questions about...
life.
Yeah. It raises a ton of questions about why, what, and why. It's the equivalent of selling shares in a mine, right? No. You're never going to see the mine. You have no proof that it exists except my story of it. Pay me $18,000. Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
That's all I got to say about a disappearing sculpture that weighs 76,000 pounds. The final story today is the story of the Mary Celeste.
Yay!
This is about a ship called the Mary Celeste, and we are going to seriously personify this ship because it's the only way we're going to figure this out, and we're going to figure this out.
Okay, we're going to solve it here.
Yeah. The Mary Celeste is often mistakenly called the Marie Celeste, and the reason for that is that after this incident happened, it really captured people's imagination, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, again, he's popping up again in this episode, he wrote a fictionalized version of these events, and in that fictionalized version, he called it the Marie Celeste.
Arthur Conan Doyle has his fingers in all these weird disappearances and stuff. That man, he's in all of that.
If it was weird, he was there.
If it was weird, he was involved, yes.
Famous spiritualist, So record is straight. Mary Celeste.
Mary Celeste.
Can't even get her name right.
That's right. That's why she's coming back, because you keep calling her by the wrong name, and she's not having it.
The Mary Celeste was a brigantine, which basically meant that it had two masts.
Okay.
There are other things about it, like the shape of it, but that I'm just trying to give you a visual. So that's all you get, because I didn't want to try and have to understand everything. I can't understand everything, Teresa.
This is not a shipbuilders podcast.
No. Contrary to popular belief.
You guys keep making us tell these stories. We don't want to. We don't care about ships, but you just insist. All of the mail is about, no, really, you need to invent a new kind of ship. That's not us, man.
The Mary Celeste was about 99 feet in length and 25 feet across.
Oh, she's little.
Yeah, she's pretty little. The Mary Celeste was built in Nova Scotia and sailed as a British ship in 1861, and she was called the Amazon. Her first captain actually fell ill on her inaugural voyage and later died.
Goodness.
So, curse ship?
That's an immediate yes. Your captain gets sick and dies. That's curse ship.
She, at some point, got tangled up in some fishing equipment off the coast of Maine. And then they ran her into and sank a brig in the English Channel. The brig is another two-sailed ship, but it's faster than the brigantine.
Okay.
In Marseille, an unknown artist painted her portrait, and it's theorized that it might have been Honoré de Pellegrin. It could have been him. He's a well-known ship painter. Everyone should look up this painting because it's quite beautiful. So I just like this idea, because in my head I've personified the Mary Celeste, that she went to Marseille and was painted by a French artist.
That's right. She was sunning herself in the south of France, on the Mediterranean, having a beautiful time, being painted. Her previous curses, she let them all go. No more bad feelings. Reinvention of herself.
Yeah, so then these fucks bring her back to, like, Nova Scotia.
She's like, oh, it's cold here.
In 1867, she ran ashore during a horrible storm off Cape Breton Island near Nova Scotia.
So this is clearly the captain writing this, because she didn't run ashore. She was run ashore.
Yeah.
Someone else is fucking steering her. That's maybe why she's so angry. She's like, you bastards are the ones pointing me where I need to go, and you keep running me into things.
Exactly. To add insult to injury, her damage was so bad that they just abandoned her as a wreck.
Jerks.
They left her there. And this is going to be key in my theory, so remember this for later. She's like, you guys are running me into fishing gear, making me sink other ships, and now I've been abandoned. Can someone competent just fucking sail me?
She puts an ad in the local paper, in search of competent captain and crew.
Yeah.
Brigantine, middle age, recently painted by a French artist.
NBD.
NBD. Loves sailing and not running into things.
Then, this guy buys her, and we're not going to say their names because we don't fucking care. This guy buys her as a derelict, and then immediately sells her off to another man, who then sells her off to a man named Richard Haynes, who was an American businessman. And the Mary Celeste was like, fucking finally, because Richard paid 4 times her price to restore her.
Yay.
So she's like, someone who understands me and is willing to put some energy into me, he's the one.
He's the one I've been looking for. He answered her ad.
He renames her the Mary Celeste. Side note, Maria Celeste is the name of a woman who was an illegitimate daughter of Galileo and a nun, and it's thought that she might have been the inspiration for the name Haynes chose. Maria Celeste was put in a convent by Galileo, her father, with some of her sisters. Because they were illegitimate, they weren't considered worthy of marriage. He had these children with Marina Gamba, all with the same woman, so it was clearly a relationship. They just didn't put a ring on it. She was also sent to the convent because Daddy had some money problems. She chose her nun name as Maria Celeste in honor of the Virgin Mary, but Celeste as tribute to her father's passion for astronomy. Also, she was a Poor Clare, which is the best nun team, and she was an apothecary, sending her father herbal treatments for his illnesses, managing the convent's finances, and staging plays in the convent.
Witch, bookkeeper, producer.
We call that a triple threat in the biz. I just liked this detail that she helped with Galileo's manuscripts, and he repaired the windows and maintained the clock in the convent.
Nice.
But then she died from dysentery at the age of 33.
Yeah.
That's Maria Celeste.
And we think that's who Mary Celeste was named for.
It could be.
I like that very much.
Unfortunately, the Mary Celeste and Haynes, her first decent owner, were separated in 1869 when she was seized by creditors. Of course. He's a great guy, but he had some stains on his credit report.
He spent 4 times her value painting her again. I mean, it's lovely, and creditors will be involved in that.
So the Mary Celeste was sold to a consortium led by James H. Winchester.
Interesting.
Is that a Winchester connection? I couldn't really tell.
I don't know. I think a little quick Google. James H. Winchester?
Mm-hmm. I mean, go for it. I tried and I couldn't find any information.
I have no additional information. What a surprise. I can't find in 3 minutes what you couldn't find in 5 hours.
Oh, no. 3 minutes was about the time I spent. I was like, this isn't worth more than 3 minutes of my time.
You're like, oh, no, I didn't work on it that hard.
But I do think we should spend 10 minutes on it on the podcast, because everybody knows that 3 minutes real time is 10 minutes podcast time.
Yeah, and it's the best use of the time we have with you guys is to let you know what it's like to Google things and not find any information about it. We know that that's riveting storytelling.
Yeah, that's just math and marketing.
That's our new podcast, actually. It's called Math and Marketing.
Yeah. I don't know if he was related to the Winchesters. The Winchesters of Winchester. This group, led by James Winchester, refit her. They're like, she's not good enough. We have to increase her length by 4 feet. So she's 103 feet now. 4 feet? What are those 4 feet essential for?
It seems like a lot of work for 4 feet.
Yeah. They also increased her breadth by, I think, half a foot or something like that.
Oh my God.
A second deck was installed. The poop deck was extended. With all this work done to her, her tonnage was increased by about 100 tons.
For nothing. Okay.
For aesthetics. Jesus. And she's like, what the fuck? Do you know how much harder it is to be seaworthy now, you dicks?
You're already running me into things, okay? I'm already as nimble as I can be, and I'm still being run into things. Now you've made me like a dead elephant, and I cannot maneuver. I cannot maneuver like this.
Almost half the shares in the Mary Celeste were owned by her now new captain, Benjamin Spooner Briggs. In 1872, Briggs took command of the Mary Celeste for her first voyage.
Oh my God.
Which was a trip to Genoa, Italy. Briggs's wife and daughter Sophia, who was an infant at the time, were going with him.
Don't bring a baby on the ship.
The Mary Celeste set sail from New York City en route to Genoa, Italy on November 7th, 1872. The ship's cargo was almost 2,000 barrels of denatured alcohol. In nearby Hoboken at the time...
Nothing good happens in or near Hoboken.
In nearby Hoboken, New Jersey, the De Grazia, another ship, captained by Captain David Morehouse, was waiting for its petroleum cargo. It too was bound for Genoa. It is speculated that Briggs and Morehouse maybe knew each other, though there's no hard evidence, say my sources. But there is word of Morehouse's widow 50 years later saying that Briggs and Morehouse may have eaten dinner together the night before the Mary Celeste departed for Genoa. The De Grazia left 8 days after the Mary Celeste along the same route. Almost a month later, on Wednesday, December 4th, 1872, the De Grazia under Morehouse's command reached the halfway point between the Azores Island, which is an archipelago in the Atlantic, and the coast of Portugal. Morehouse's helmsman pointed out a vessel about 6 miles away. The ship was moving strangely, and the set of its sails was also odd, so they decided to get closer and investigate.
I love that they know what sails should look like for the current conditions. And they're like, those sails is weird. What's up with that?
The sails they were at partial sail. They were hanging there is the basic thing.
Okay.
As they approached, nobody was on deck, and there was no response to the De Grazia's signals. They saw the name Mary Celeste on the ship's stern, so they climbed aboard. The ship, as I said, was under partial sail, and the sails were damaged, some of them missing completely. The rigging was somewhat damaged too. The main hatch was closed, but other hatches were open. The glass cover that held the ship's compass was broken. The main hold had about 3.5 feet of water in it, which actually isn't that serious of an amount. A sounding rod was abandoned on the deck, and the sounding rod is the instrument that's used to measure the amount of water in the hold. No signs of fire or violence were found. The ship was filled with provisions. The denatured alcohol on board wasn't exploded. The crew's personal items seemed untouched. Other documents and paperwork that should have been on board were missing, as were the navigational instruments. In the ship's log, the last log entry was from 9 days previous.
Okay, so at the time Morehouse found it, there had been no log entries for 9 days.
Right. And the ship's one lifeboat was missing. Morehouse and his crew decided to bring the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, which was 600 nautical miles away, which is 690
dirt miles.
So they split their 8-person crew into 2 to do that. Whatever the split was, I don't necessarily think it was 4 and 4, but that's not very many people to do this. At the time, if you salvaged a ship, you were guaranteed part of the value of that ship. And this was determined by determining the value of the ship, but also determining the danger of the situation involved in the salvage. So Morehouse was probably anticipating that he was going to get some cash out of this. De Grazia got to Gibraltar on December 12th, the Mary Celeste on December 13th. She was delayed by fog. So the Vice Admiralty Court took the Mary Celeste immediately into custody for salvage hearings. And I was wondering, how do you take a ship into custody? Do you just put a guy on the dock?
Aren't they already always in custody?
Yeah. It's not like they loaded her up and carted her away, I don't think.
No, they put handcuffs on her and put her in a ship jail.
And now she's really pissed.
The last straw.
Yeah.
She's like, you saw what I did to the people who tried to sail me back here, right?
That's right.
Oh, no, you didn't, because they're gone.
And so these salvage hearings were run by a man named Frederick Sally Flood, who was the Eternal General of Gibraltar.
Yep.
The Attorney General of Gibraltar. Described as a man, quote, whose arrogance and pomposity were inversely proportional to his IQ.
Ooh.
Also described as, quote, the sort of man who, once he had made up his mind about something, couldn't be shifted.
Ah, unwilling to look at new data.
Yeah.
What a great quality in a person.
So Flood became convinced that foul play was a factor and that alcohol was the motive. And nothing was going to take him off that path. This was truth.
This is classic police and court investigation. Decide what happened and then backfill to prove your point.
This is classic Eternal General. In their investigation of the ship, they found some cuts on the bow, which they thought were caused intentionally by some kind of a sharp instrument. And they also found what they thought was blood on the captain's sword that was in his quarters. It was sheathed. I do remember that. There was no evidence of the ship being run aground or having any kind of collision.
Yes, because she's not doing that anymore.
She's not. Another inspection, like a second inspection, was done of the ship, and what may have been blood was found on one of the railings, and a mark of some kind was found that could have been from the impact of an axe.
This is amazing, and I'm sure that in between these two investigations, nobody was on the ship, no one had access to the ship, it was hermetically sealed, no one touched it, no one did anything to it, right? The chain of custody was impeccable, no one had access. I'm sure it was just really well handled.
Because one of the things that Flood was saying, I didn't write this out, so forgive me if it's not exactly right, but one of his pieces of evidence that it was foul play and not any kind of weather or natural event was that there was, I think it was a bottle with sewing needles in it that was standing upright. But this was like way after the fact. Like so many people had been on the ship and they were like, there's a possibility that someone just righted it. Flood was thoroughly convinced. He was like, I suspect a murder. He decided that what had happened was that the crew drank the denatured alcohol, which is, if for anyone doesn't know, is pure horrible. It doesn't taste good.
It's how you go blind, right? I mean, that's, yeah.
That they had gotten into that and like in a drunken fury had killed Captain Briggs and his family, and then they fled in the lifeboat. Then he was like, oh, no, that's not it. Morehouse wasn't being totally honest, he thought, because the Mary Celeste must have traveled 400 nautical miles in those 9 days, and he didn't think it could drift that far without a crew. Then James H. Winchester shows up, and he's like, I'm ready for my ship now. And Flood's like, not so fast. Give me some money. This is a real simplification of what happened. Pretty soon, Winchester realized that Flood thought that he himself had intentionally hired a crew that would kill Briggs in some kind of conspiracy. What would have been the benefit of having your captain killed?
Does Flood get the ship if they prove this? Like, I'm trying to figure out what his interest is in this. Is there some obscure law in Gibraltar that the Attorney General gets the ship if no one can prove? Like, oh my God.
Maybe. But Flood was determined. He was like, someone killed someone somewhere at some point. And I'm going to not prove it, but just keep saying it. Flood's theories fell apart when analysis of the stains, the one on the sword and the one on the railing, showed that they weren't blood, and that the marks on the ship were caused naturally by the ocean's movement on the hull.
Oh my God.
The Mary Celeste was finally released, and she's like, thank God. And she sailed on to Genoa. So they're like, we're getting this denatured alcohol to Genoa, because if there's anything Genoans love, it's denatured alcohol. So the Mary Celeste did continue to sail after that. In 1885, her new captain intentionally wrecked her off the coast of Haiti in an attempt to get insurance money.
God damn it.
And she was never recovered.
This poor ship.
I feel like I know who the victim here is, and it's the ship.
That's right. All of these other things are purely incidental to the tragedy of this woman's life.
Yeah. This guy was found guilty of barratry, which is the crime of willfully abandoning a ship. And I love that that's against the maritime law.
That's right.
You don't abandon a ship.
That's right. She takes care of you.
His conviction was eventually deferred for reasons, but he died destitute 3 months later. Another one of his co-defendants in this case went insane, and the third one killed himself.
Yeah, that's right. Finally, she's had it. She's like, you know what? I'm not tolerating this anymore. Now I'm actively evil, and I will ruin your lives.
Yeah. So let's get into some theories.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a theory that it was insurance fraud because the ship actually was highly overinsured. There's another theory that Morehouse was lying in wait and attacked the Mary Celeste with the De Grazia. But the thing that ignores is that the De Grazia was a much slower ship and left 8 days after the Mary Celeste.
Yeah. The thing that ignores is all the facts.
There's a theory that Briggs and Morehouse did know each other and were somehow in cahoots, like in the scam to share the salvage money. That's sort of disproven by the idea that this case got a lot of publicity. Like, this was pretty public. Like, why would you do it in that way?
Mm-hmm.
And then also because Briggs left his son behind for this trip to Genoa. So it's like, if you were planning to disappear forever, why would you leave your son behind?
Mm-hmm.
Unless your son really sucked. There's another theory that it was pirates. There was a group of pirates that were active in the area, but nothing was taken.
There's one thing we know, which is that pirates really like sewing needles.
They would have taken those.
They would have, without a second thought.
And they would have repaired the shit out of their pantaloons. There's another theory that it was an iceberg.
Even with no damage on the ship.
Yeah.
Great.
There's another theory that they were becalmed and somehow left the ship because they were becalmed, but the sails weren't all the way up. So there was the point that if you're becalmed, you put up the sails because you want to catch anything.
But if you are then going to take the lifeboat and leave, you don't leave the sails up because that's a really good way to wreck your ship.
Yeah,
because you don't want the wind to catch it with nobody steering it. So maybe you do loosen those things up. But no notes. No notes.
Be back in 5. There's another theory that it was a sea quake. There's theories that it was a giant squid. To me, one of the most realistic theories is that they got a false reading from their sounding rod. If there had been a water spout nearby, what happens is the barometric pressure drops, and that could have pulled water from the bilge into the pumps, would have made them mistakenly think that the ship was taking on water at a rapid pace when it wasn't. If the water spout strike had occurred and they thought there was a bunch of water, they would have probably left the ship and then something happened that prevented their return to the ship. This explanation would clarify the damage to the ship's sails and the rigging as well as the water in the hull. At least that's somewhat based in possibility.
Yeah, I like things that look at the evidence and go from there. That appeals to me.
The kind of second half of this, which is sort of a separate theory, but I think sort of connected, is that if something had gone wrong and they got into the lifeboat as a safety measure, like for water in the hull, they would have gotten in the lifeboat and then they could have tied a line to the ship to keep a connection. But if that line got cut, the Mary Celeste could have just sailed away.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened because I think the Mary Celeste was like, fuck y'all. And y'all abandoned me. And now I'm going to abandon you.
One of her ghost hands comes from the water with a pair of ghost scissors and snips the line between the lifeboat and her.
Yeah. She's like, it's not me, it's you.
I'm tired of you parasites. Get out of here. I'm going to be free.
I think she just wanted to sail by herself. I think she just needed some alone time.
She couldn't go to a spa because Agatha Christie had taken her reservation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. I love that. I feel so bad for the baby.
Yeah. No, it's really, so, I mean, just to back up a little bit, it's completely horrible. Like, I mean, I've made a lot of, I kind of had a take on this, but it is really horrible. And I do wonder, like, where they ended up. Did something tragic happen and they all died? Or even if something tragic happened, did they all end up on a desert island and just they were marooned and lived out the rest of their days as castaways or what? I don't know.
This is why it'll be fun when the rapture does happen, because we'll get to learn the answers to all of these questions.
Yeah.
Where was Agatha Christie on those 11 days when she was gone? Really? What happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste?
That's the only reason I'm excited for Heaven.
Sounds pretty boring otherwise.
I mean, yeah. But it might be worth it to just know all the answers. I've thought about that actually a lot.
Mm.
Like, I hope there is an afterlife just because I want to know all this stuff.
Yeah.
We're just going to get a little sheet. Frequently asked questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Who killed JFK?
Yeah.
Where's Jimmy Hoffa?
Yeah.
Did Elvis die? Was there a Loch Ness Monster?
That's also what I'm looking forward to the most. I love it that you have raised these questions. Thank you so much for these 3 stories of disappearances.
You're welcome. Go and be creeped out, everybody.
Go forth and be creeped.
Not be creeps. Be creeped. So my sources for today, of course, Wikipedia. For the Agatha Christie story, allthat'sinteresting.com was a good resource, as well as crimereads.com, a piece there by Via Putnam. For the Equal Parallel story, I used the website How Stuff Works, their history section, the website for the Museo Nacional Centro de Arte Reina, the Sofia website, and BBC News. For the Mary Celeste story, I actually just used the Wikipedia page. It's really well researched and thorough, so check that out if you want to know more.
Thanks so much, Claire. This has been great.
Thank you all for listening. We will see you soon. Again, remember to like, subscribe, and download, please. Thank you.
Woohoo. Bye-bye.
Testing. Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyoupodcast@gmail.com.